Hello and welcome back to the Bad Deal Podcast. This is episode 3. Man, we're excited to be back. We're having a lot of fun with this podcast. Also, a couple of little things I wanted to hit. I know I'm the boring guy. I have to do like the announcements every time. We have this show on Spotify and on YouTube. So if you're listening on Spotify and you've never watched it on YouTube, hey, come check us out on Skeptical Critic. It's a YouTube channel. It's pretty epic. You can watch this podcast the same way, same audio, but just with our faces, which if
I have a beard.
He does have a beard, and you can see what we look like. If you are on YouTube, you can go jump onto Spotify just the same, and that way if you're going on a car ride or if it's more convenient for you, hey, go do that, and you can listen to it wherever you're going, because we want to make sure the Bad Deal is everywhere you are, and we're going to continue to work on expanding where that is. We just got a TikTok, so you can go check us out on TikTok now at Skeptical Critic. It's all Skeptical Critic, so you can check us out on Instagram, Twitter, all of it. We will eventually, I have had requests for this, Apple Podcasts, like Apple in general. Why are we not on there? The simple answer is that Apple, like everything they do, makes it very hard for someone to get onto their platform without doing a bunch of steps. So for me to get us on there, I have to do things, and it takes a bit of time. So we're not rushing to get onto Apple yet. You can probably tell I'm a little bit of an anti-Apple guy, but we won't get into that because we have a different topic to argue about, which is mulligans and proxies today. Yeah. That's a show topic. Ben, as usual, man, all of the pressure of this episode succeeding is on you.
As it should be.
So what are we starting with today?
Yeah, so we're going to start with mulligans today.
Okay.
And so for those of you that are watching on YouTube, you can stop doing the double tap on the right side of the screen. Mm-hmm. So you can stop skipping ahead. Yep. The boring stuff's over. We're going to talk about our topic today, which is mulligans. Yep. Which is something that our play group we've really kind of played with a couple different options there. So obviously we know, and we'll go through real quick. We'll explain the mulligan rule that is currently accepted for Commander. Yes. Which is, so you got your grip of 7 cards. Mm-hmm. If you hate it, you shuffle it back in. Or are you supposed to shuffle it back in? I don't know the exact ruling. If you set the cards, do you shuffle it in? I thought maybe you set the cards aside and draw a new 7 and then shuffle it in.
That's a good question. We should
Jamie look that up.
Hey, Keegan. We have Keegan today, so we're gonna have Keegan do the search for us. Keegan, freaking figure it out, man. Okay, while Keegan tries to figure that out, because that is a good thing to know. And again, like I
had never even thought about
we're literally, this is why we make this podcast, is because like I feel like I should know that. But assuming it's like whatever,
so it's either, so you draw 7 to start, then you either are gonna pitch it, either you're gonna put it at the bottom of your library, or you shuffle it back in, or you set it aside and draw 7. Either way, you get a new 7, and then you get to keep that 7 if you want. Mm-hmm. If not, you're going to do the process again, and this time, once you have your 7, you have to get rid of 1, go down to 6. Yep. Then you can keep going until, obviously, you're out of cards, and then probably you just quit.
Yeah, usually if you get down to 5, I would be like, I'm done. Yeah, I concede.
This feels bad.
Yeah, which isn't, I don't know what the official rules are, so maybe we can make Keegan search this up as well, but I'm fairly certain, like, if you go down to 0, you could technically start the game with no hand. Is that like what it would be, or do you just like, can you concede in that game and then you just lose the game? Like, I'm curious to what the official like ruling would be.
You do shuffle them back. So you do. So we're getting word from Jamie that you do go ahead, and is that the guy's name?
From Joe Rogan.
From Joe Rogan.
Jamie.
It's Jamie.
Yeah.
So the London mulligan. Yes, the London mulligan. Mm-hmm. I know that it used to be the partial Paris, which was when you could keep a certain amount of your hand. So if you liked 4 cards, you would keep the 4, then you'd pitch the 3 and draw a new 3. And so now we've gone to the London style thing. And so now you would shuffle all 7 back in, draw a fresh 7, and then you discard down as need be for future
assuming mulligans. That anyone who would go below 5 at that point, it should just...
Yeah, and I mean, to circle back and answer your question, I feel like for the most part, you would be hard pressed to find a play group that would be like, if you're down to 3 cards, you're going to play with 3 cards. And that kind of flows right into what we are going to talk about today. And I think that both of our topics, mulligans and proxies, really falls under this tab of like this Rule 0 discussion. And maybe we should explain what that is as well.
You should explain what the Rule 0 is.
So from my understanding of Rule 0,
and I will pull up the official Rule 0. Brandon, future Brandon, Keegan, pull up Rule Zero.
It'll be on the screen.
It'll be on the screen. but go ahead.
So my understanding of Rule Zero is that it's kind of like what it is. It's a general discussion, especially surrounding power level of your decks between friends before you start the game.
Yeah.
And so for us, I think it's fair to you include stuff like mulligans and proxies into your Rule Zero about like if you were to look up the official rules set by the All High Rules Committee on the interwebs, these aren't necessarily listed there, but these are things that like we're gonna agree to have to play with.
The way I think of it is because you have Magic becoming a continuously complex game, there's only so much they can do to like accommodate all the rules and all the things they'll do. Obviously, Magic is very well, I don't know if I would say very well balanced, but it's a balanced-ish game. Commander less so, but it's balanced, so there's banned cards, all that stuff. We've talked about that last time. There's a banned list, Yeah. But in this case, I think of Rule Zero as kind of like, all right, what does our group need for rules? Like, and so you can kind of add those Rule Zeros. And so you can just add as many rules as you feel fit for your group to make the game better.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And so I think that is kind of flows, like I said, right into what we want to talk about today, which are two very distinct subsets of Rule Zero, which for us is mulligans and proxies.
Yes.
And we've dabbled in both.
Yep.
And so I think let's get right into some of the different rules that we've tried for mulligans.
Okay.
There was one that I had pitched to our group that we've tried before, which is you draw your hand, and if you're like, and this was all about time for me because we all sleeve our decks. We all suck at shuffling 100 sleeve cards. It's very difficult. So what we would say is, okay, you take your hand, and at any point you could discard, or you choose to set one of your non-land cards, at the bottom of your library. You shuffle it back in and just grab a non-land, or you grab a land, a basic land. I think we said you can't go find your guy's
You can't search
cradle.
your library or anything. Yeah. It's just.
But if you're like, I just need an island, then you just go grab the island. You discard non-land card.
Yeah, and so we did use it for quite some time. I even used it. I'm usually the guy, like, if there's gonna, and you can correct me if you disagree with me on this, but I think in our play group, as far as people who are like pushing for rules, I think you argue for some certain rules. At least if we're talking about it, we don't do it a whole lot. Like, I don't think we've had major debates on like rules too much in the past couple of months. But for me, I tend to be like, because I host these games often, so I tend to be like, all right, well, this is what I think we should play it as. And then sometimes Ben would host, and he would be like, well, this is how I think we should play it as. And we usually would just kind of do it by whoever's house it was at for a period. There was a short period of time where that was the case. Now it's kind of like, I think we recently kind of returned to the traditional rules. So we did no Rule Zeros for mulligans. It was just like, if you got screwed over, just concede the game and play a different deck, was kind of what we ended up going with, which was a stark contrast to what we were doing when you were more active last year.
Yeah. And I think for me, what it comes down to, and the reason that I liked our mulligan rule of allowing that discard to find the non-land, is because I feel like at its best, what we're all doing is trying to play the game. And so it would tick me off, when I'm like, either we're sitting there for 10 minutes because it's taken people forever to shuffle their cards and draw a new 7, and then you're like, okay, I have less lands this time, so we're doing it again. And you're just like, this is not what we're here for.
Yeah.
So in some ways, I'm like, I'd rather give that person the slight competitive advantage of fixing that hand rather than take the time and effort to have them go find a new 7.
The problem with this is generally I agree with you. Like, I where you're coming from makes sense. Okay, it's not like the most aggressive or egregious decision for a mulligan. It's actually I would say not very controversial at all. But what the problem is when you have people like, and I feel like we call him out almost every episode, and maybe that's just what we do. Maybe we just trash Noah the entire podcast and then never let him come on this podcast to speak for himself.
He can't defend himself.
But like, the fact is that this guy came into this playing group and like, he's like, yeah, so if I get the right hand, I win the game on turn 3. Because he built a deck. It was a Boros deck. I can't remember what the commander is. I don't even know if he still plays it. But this is when the change happened, was I was like, wait, so your hand actually matters? And he's like, yeah. If I get the right hand, I just will win on turn. And he has done it to me. And it sucks. And there's nothing you can do about it. And
he
so
took you out to dinner, told you that he loved you, and then he never called you again.
Exactly. And so we decided that rule needed to go because that was just helping him get one more step to what he needed to be at. Which I don't think I'd say that there was. I can't say that there's evidence that says if he was able to do that, that's what got him that turn 3-way. I'm not saying that at all. What I am saying is I didn't like the idea of that potentially leading to that, and so that's why we went towards casually. It was like it didn't happen right away, but it just felt like that was the natural progression.
And that's kind of the problem with some of these, with all Rule Zeros. I think the problem is that they're all, I think the way that I explained it, where it's like, we're just trying to all be friends and play the game, and we want to just speed up the process so we can get more games in. That's all great. But then when people start to abuse these things and they use it for a true, because like I talked about, we're giving people slight competitive advantages. And so I guess, and also part of the issue was that what we went away from was we had an additional rule besides that, where we said, okay, even if we don't want to do the discard thing to find a land, we'll just let you like get a good 7.
Okay.
Take extra mulligans if you need to. Yeah. You don't have to discard down to 6. Like, take a good 7. And then that also was abused a little bit. Or at least we have the threat that it could be abused.
I abused that, I think, because I would just be like, well, boom, we can do that.
Lock them up.
I was just like, hey, why not get the perfect hand for my deck?
Right.
Like, and I just did that, and I would say that that one would be one that I'd be like, nah, we don't need that. We should be building decks that are good enough where like that doesn't need to be the case.
Right. And sometimes the stuff happens. You know, you can have a great deck, but you're sitting there and you're like, my first hand I drew had 2 lands, didn't want to keep it. My second one has 1 land. Yeah. You're just not going to do that. And so I'm still an advocate for where I would say, if you want to go ahead and grab an extra hand of 7, I'm okay to give people 1 or 2 steps where we're like, but then, you know, you shouldn't be taking 4 mulligans and then you're dropping your Soul Ring turn 1. You're turning that into your Arcane Signet and you're like, I wonder, you know, exactly. And so maybe there's moderation there even where we could say like at any point, like you reveal your hand before you take that extra mulligan. You can choose to reveal your hand and leave it up to the discussion of the table. Because if you reveal your hand and I'm seeing that you have an island in there, you're playing your 3-color commander, you're screwed. You can't play that hand. So I'm okay to be like, shuffle that in and take a 7.
Yeah. So no, and I get, again, like I think it's a reasonable rule. I just think that I guess our only, without having a lot of discussion about it, the only thing that we went for was like, hey, why don't you just concede and play a different deck, you loser? Yeah. Get over it, you know? And then you just, and you play, and what we would do, like, I've had a situation of like, well, I suck and this sucks and I want to deal with this, so I shuffle it up, put it away, and I bring out my other deck that I have. And I think, like, you know, for me that one kind of works because it's like, well, you don't have to go deal with a crappy game, which no one wants that, because I agree that sucks. Why would I want that for anybody? You
don't want to sit there for an hour
while
your friends
you have other decks, and hopefully your other decks would still be good enough to play against the board. And I mean, like, in Commander and Casual Commander, I would say that like you should aim to have 3 decks. You know, if you've been playing for a year or 2, you know, 3 decks is a nice place to be at. You don't have to, of course, but it's nice to have that variation so that, you know, depending on what you're playing against, you can be like, oh, well, this one works better that. So it made sense to me in that time.
And I don't love that rule either, where you have to play a different deck for a couple of reasons. One, I think we've talked about before, like lowering the barrier to entry. Yeah. And so that doesn't help that. Also, the whole point for me of doing mulligan rules was to save time. So having someone hunt down and shuffle up a whole new deck actually costs us time. And additionally, it's just one of those things where you're like, well, I just built this new deck, want to bust it out. But if I don't get good hands on my first 2 draws, like if I'm playing the deck I've played for the last 6 months. So I have a couple points there that I don't love. And, you know,
I think one of us is trying to make the game more fun and easy to play. The other person's just trying to stop Noah from abusing the rules in some way or another. And I think that's truly what the issue is. And so, you know, maybe we need a rule 0 that Noah changes as a person.
Yeah. And I also would like to throw out there that, Noah, if you're listening to this, I wasn't around when all these changes were apparently necessary. So I'm not going to sit here and say Noah cheated. So if you're saying that,
I'm not accusing him of anything, but he did have a conversation with me that made me think about it. That I'm not saying that he was going to go do this, but he looked at me with his crazy eyes and was like, Brandon, there's this card that lets you take another mulligan. Or something. It was like, it's meant for like the mulligan rule. And he's like, and it would be so cool if I built a deck. And he was like, blah, 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 blah. He's telling me all these things about it. I'm like, well, that doesn't work with our current rule set. Mm-hmm. So if you want that, we need to go to the thing. He's like, yeah. He's like, wouldn't that be so cool? He never did it. But like, you know, I also on one hand was trying to like worry about the Boros deck, but then also he talked about it later, and it was like, oh, you should build that deck. That'd be so funny if you have a card that literally is designed just to let you have another mulligan or something. I don't know why he wanted to play that card. I couldn't tell you what the the excitement of that card was for him, but he had it in there and wanted to do it.
Yeah, he does like that sort of thing. And again, I don't want this to turn into rag on Noah.
I don't want to rag on Noah, but I wanted to explain why I feel strongly, and the only way I can explain that is by explaining our play group, which our play group often is Noah.
And even more so than just saying this is Noah, I think Noah's also like just kind of exhibiting human nature here, which is like when we talk about the rule where we're like, grab an extra 7 if you need to.
Yeah.
There's been times when I'm like, so I have the lands, but maybe I don't have a turn 2 or 3 play. And I'm like, I think I could just pitch it. I was like, I want to have a signet. I want to have some turn 2 play, some turn 3 play, either ramp or card draw. Yeah. So there are times when I'm looking at it and I'm like, I know I can just go get a better hand. And so I think that is the more realistic, because Noah he didn't do these things, but he talked about how there is this avenue to an extreme of like, I'll mulligan 6 times till I get my Soul Ring, till I get my Arcane Signet, until you have this hand that's going to go off on turn 2 or 3. Yeah. And maybe that's not realistic, something that would actually happen. Yeah. But the part that is realistic is me saying, I have my 3 lands, but I don't have my Soul Ring. I don't have my Signet. I don't have any ramp on turn 1 or 2 or 3. Yeah. So I'm just going to pitch it and grab something better. And that's not the point of our...
No, and again, I think if you tone down the extreme, like I love our play group and how goofy we are. We talk about how we can cheat as much as we possibly can, and it's a joke. But I think if we're looking at this, it's just how do you apply this into your play group? Like, how do you approach a rule 0? I think like your concept, that's a really, I think, good one to include if your play group is unaware that this is not an opportunity for you to go get the perfect hand. It's an opportunity to make it so you can just play the game of the deck that you want to play today.
Because it's like I said, we don't want you sitting there being like, man, I had to go to 4 cards because I could not get lands in hand. And so the hand I finally kept is 3 lands and then a single spell. Yeah. That's not a fun time for you. No. So we're saying like moderation there is important. And the one last thing I want to add before we move on to proxies here is it's also important to keep in mind what decks you're benefiting by including these rules. Mm-hmm. So something I thought about is, well, I play a mono green deck now. And in that deck, I need to mulligan a lot less because my lands are mostly just forests. And so I'm never going to be mana screwed. And so what is the advantage to playing a multicolored deck is you have, if I added one other color, I double, because the way the commander is, you have cards from all throughout history. I went from having 1,000 cards available to having 2,000 cards available for me to play in that deck. And so those are the decks you benefit. You take away that downside of playing the multicolor, which is sometimes you don't have the right colors.
Yeah, because in a mono deck, I feel like you could be like, I have 2 lands in my hand, but, you know, all my spells in my hand right now are green, and they're like 2-3 mana, you know? Like, you could get away with that, right? That's maybe not an ideal situation, but you can much easier get away with that than if you're a 5-color deck, right? You know, and you're like, oh, I don't have like my key color that I need. Yeah, and you have to ask like, okay, do you benefit the person who's actively taking on a harder challenge? I think so. Exactly. I think that's fine, right? Mono is just. I'm not saying that you're a bad player, you know, that you're playing mono. That's not the case at all. I think that it's a great opportunity for everybody to just have like a good hand, or at least a better chance at a good hand, which is fine.
So I think, are we saying opposites here? Because I want to clarify. I feel like we are. Are you saying that mono is easier, so it's okay to give it the downside of mulligans mattering less?
I understand.
I'm the opposite there.
I think that it's not enough of a benefit for the mono decks to be something to be like, oh, I hate this. Don't like, if your whole group is mono decks, I don't think you need this mulligan rule. That's what I'm trying to say. Yeah. It's like, I don't think if you're saying the whole group is like mostly 1 or 2 color, I don't know. I don't see this issue being an issue. Yeah. So would this rule 0 even be a conversation in the first place?
Maybe not, but I guess that's also kind of my point is like, if you're going to go out and play a 3-color, 4-color, 5-color deck, you accept that is the downside. You just gave yourself so many extra resources because it's like, I added blue, now I can draw cards. Mm-hmm. And so the downside is now you have to take it upon yourself in your deck building to make sure that you can find islands and find ways to get that blue mana.
But again, speaking to like what you said, I feel like I'm arguing for your thing now, but like speaking to what you said earlier, like yes, like I agree with you. I do think that's a downfall of a Wooburg deck. But at the same time, the reason why you would introduce that mulligan in the first place is so that those Wooburg decks have their opportunity.
And that's my point. My point is just to be aware when you're having these discussions of which decks it benefits, because to your point, like you said, if there's this play group out there and you're all like, I'm sticking to a 1 or 2 color deck because that's what's easy for me to play, understand that if you're adding these mulligan rules and if you're taking the steps to make it easier to find your lands and find your mana base and play the game, you eliminate some of the downside to playing a 4 color or 5 color deck because the downside is that mana fixing.
I agree.
So it's just important to keep that in mind.
I think that we kind of are finding it. I think we agree on this mostly.
I think so too.
I think that your like reasonings for wanting it might be slightly different than mine, which would you probably, if you look through this conversation, you probably find we have slightly different perspectives on it. Maybe I have different concerns than you do, but in the end of the day, I think it's a pretty tame rule 0. I have seen much more concerning rule 0s than that. I think it's,
which is somewhat what we're going to get into here with a new discussion. And again, so let's officially, let's go ahead. Let's move on to proxies. And again, I want to repeat something that we've mentioned before that I think is important specifically for this conversation, which is that our play group tends to be similar. Our play group is similar in how our financial commitment to the game, in that we don't have $1,000 decks. No. We have $100 decks. Some people play less. Some people play a little bit more, but we're all in a similar range. So the conversation of proxies has to include the fact that it opens up a world in theory where you're playing cards that our playgroup would never otherwise interact with.
And just before I appreciate that. For the newer players who have never seen a proxy, just to explain what a proxy is. Yeah. Let's take, I don't know, what's a card you can think of that would be like?
I was thinking, so Mana Vault is the one that comes to mind to me immediately, or Mana Crypt, actually.
Crypt.
More so, which is fast mana,
yeah.
Which, again, all these are terms that maybe people don't know. So fast mana is essentially a card that is cheating. The game has a natural curve because you're allowed to play 1 land per turn. That's going to increase what you can cast by 1 mana per turn. That's the natural mana curve.
Yep.
Mana Crypt and other cards like that break the game on that curve early. So on turn 1, you have access to 2, 3, 4 mana. Turn 2, 5, 6, 7. So you break the game. Not in that's another term is ramp, which is what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to break that curve. Yeah. So by turn 5, you have 7 mana available. Yeah. Fast mana breaks the game early. Does it on turn 1 or turn 2. So that's a really important denomination there. Our play group and play groups that don't have access to a lot of money don't tend to play as much fast mana because those cards are very expensive because every deck wants to play them because it's never not beneficial.
There's no downside
to have extra mana early in the game.
Yeah. Like if you have a 0 cost card, right? Like, and I know Black Lotus is like the most.
That's a very iconic.
It's an iconic card, right? Yes. But like, if Black Lotus was even allowed to be played in Commander, right? You would.
Which I think it is Commander legal.
Is it Commander legal?
Yeah, it's like $10,000, so no one ever plays it.
Okay, so I'm assuming if you're looking at Black Lotus, okay, it's a 0 cost mana. It's a one-time mana card.
Yep, you do. So it's 0 cost. You tap or you sacrifice it, and you get 3 mana of any color.
Which is just like
it's fast mana. It breaks the game.
Yeah, you don't get to keep it, which whatever, if you can call that a downside, but you're paying no mana for it. So if you get that in the beginning of your hand, you are very much ahead of other people as long as you build a deck around that. And so if you could proxy this would definitely change the power level. This would
not Commander legal.
I'm right.
It's
I was right.
As soon as you said that, I was like, I've never thought about that because it doesn't matter because it's so unachievable for us.
I looked into it at one point, and you want to know why I looked into it is because of the Magic 30.
Grab one.
Well, no. Magic 30 had their little anniversary thing. Those were non-tournament legal cards. But I was curious, was Black Lotus going to be legal for Commander? Because I can see why people would want to buy it for that. But it was illegal. And I'm like, why would you spend $1,000? But we're not going to talk about that. And that also makes people really angry when we talk about Magic 30, because Magic 30 makes people angry like a lot.
It was dumb, and maybe we discuss that someday.
We might talk about that, but I don't want to spoil that. But
actually,
to my point, though. To my point, actually, that is kind of...
Because those were technically proxies.
Proxy is a huge thing, which is, kind of like... So, Magic 30, if you guys didn't know, I'm just going to give a brief history of it.
Go for it.
It's basically this these booster packs, but they were like all the beta. I think it was beta, all
it's
beta.
A 30-year-old set.
Yeah, very old. So you got Ancestral Recall in it, a very crazy card. I think it's like, what is it? 1 mana?
It's like 1 mana, draw 3 or something.
Yeah, 1 mana draw.
It's banned.
Yeah, it is banned. So a lot of cards that are like, in my opinion, are crazy broken and typically don't get, ever see them.
A reason that they aren't printed anymore.
Yeah, and they're on a list. It's on the reserve list, which means they can't be printed anymore. But they got around it by saying, "Oh, these are non-tournament special cards," and that made a lot of people really angry because they're like, "Wow, I want this because I want to have my own Black Lotus, even though you can't play it in Commander."
It's also important to mention that the packs are $250 each.
Yes,
which is why we care that it was not tournament legal, because that's them saying, we know that it doesn't cost Wizards of the Coast any more to print a Black Lotus than it does a basic land.
Yeah,
they still use ink. They use the same card stock.
Yeah,
so for them to then slap a price tag and say $250, these are collector's items, is just their way of saying.
And I would go, personally, this is another kicker for me. You can't play a lot of these. Like, if you bring a Black Lotus into your play group, can I rule 0 this Black Lotus? No! I'm not going to let you play Black Lotus, especially if it's banned and it's also a really good card. And also, you went and spent $1,000 to get that card. It makes me very upset that you spent $1,000 on a box of what a lot of people refer to as proxies, because it's more as an insult towards it. But obviously we're having a conversation about proxies and should you be playing them, should you not, whatever. But I just want to give a brief history of that, because one of the reasons why we're talking about it today is because of that. And it is a very spicy topic. Like, if you go into anything that Wizards of the Coast posts currently, you will at least, and I have done this myself to prove it, you will at least see 3 people post the card Greed in the chat, just referring to Magic 30, because they're very unhappy about it. It made the Magic community more upset than they've been in a long time. But to bring us back full circle to our original proxy conversation, if you were gonna play a proxy, these are the type of cards you'd probably target.
Right,
ones that you never can touch.
Cards that are ultimately very powerful and very expensive.
Yeah,
and so more so than the Magic 30 conversation, which is the thing that I do know you're very passionate about.
Yes.
Proxies were an issue, not an issue, but were a topic in our group because I started printing them. And so I purchased cardstock.
The honesty is important.
Printer ink. And I said, hey, what if... And it wasn't just me. I was saying, if you guys pay me for the cardstock and the ink, I'll print any proxies that people want. That's the conversation there. And that's where it originated, was because I wanted to print them because I was like, this could be fun.
Yeah.
And it's a slippery slope. And I think that the way that we approached it initially was proxies are okay, but each proxy needs to be its own conversation in our group. Needs to be a conversation of, is this card game breaking? Which is funny because you landed on we should never do this, but the card that you requested initially was a $10,000 2-mana extra turn spell.
Oh yeah, I thought I asked for I was debating between asking for Ancestral Recall or another card.
I wanted to print the Ozolith, which is $25, and I just didn't feel like paying for it. Brandon wanted a reserve list card that is not Commander legal, that is $10,000, and one of the easiest broken cards in the game.
Yeah, and I did that for a reason.
You didn't.
I did. I was like, well, I want to play a broken card if we're going to do this. Because that was at the time, my very black and white look at it was just, okay, if we're going to proxy, why can't I just proxy like really broken cards?
Can I call you out, though, in front of the whole...
Yeah, I mean, we've done it before.
Because you then very openly, like, it's fine if that's how you want to spin it, but you very openly went to bat for this card as to why it wasn't broken. And
what
I don't think...
What one was it? It was the extra...
I don't remember the name. I think it was Time Warp.
I thought I asked for Ancestral Recall.
I don't think it was Time Warp, now that as soon as I'm saying it. It's a 2-mana spell, or 2 or 3 mana. It's an extra turn spell. It's very simple. It's just you take an extra turn. Now, again, we want to make it so even people that don't have a ton of experience with the game can listen to this podcast. An extra turn spell is exactly what it sounds like. You take an extra turn, and in modern day Magic, they are 5 or 6 mana. That is almost otherwise they have this crazy downside where you lose the turn at the end of the second turn, or you lose the game, excuse me, at the end of the second turn. So for one to be 2 mana, not include that type of downside, is kind of like fast mana. It's kind of like what we talked about, where it's game breaking on a level that is not equivalent to other cards.
No, I think that's totally fair. And I think that the fact that you're trying to, say that that's not chill, kind of a mean thing to do. I feel like that was totally a reasonable card to ask for. I think it was fine.
If you wanna put a sleeve on it and put it up on your wall, I would have been totally fine with
that. No,
I
think it was totally fine that you said no to that, and at the end of the day, that's fine. Would have I loved to have that two mana extra turn in Yuriko? Yeah, it'd been awesome. You guys ruined the fun for me, but it's fine. Again, if you want to only do it for $25 cards, that's fine.
Yeah,
but I wanted to do expensive $10,000 cards that are also banned in Commander, so it would be a double rule 0.
Let's take a quick time out. What do we got, Jamie?
So we've got a couple of 2-mana spells.
Okay.
Is it Time Vault?
I don't know. So we're being thrown. It was definitely, I believe it was a sorcery. Is Time Warp? Is that 5 mana or is that?
Time Warp is 3 and 2 blue. Time Walk.
That's what it was. That's what it might be.
Was 1 in a blue and take an extra turn.
So okay, so Time Walk.
You're right.
1 in a blue. Take an extra turn out of this one. It's a very powerful card. It's a very fun card, and it would have been crazy. And so, but that was also the exact thing that because I printed the proxies. I was very excited about this. I was like, in addition to, and there's 2 different types of proxies. Maybe we also need to talk. And again,
no, I'm just letting you.
Yeah.
Slander me and also talk about the proxies. So go for it.
So there's 2 different types of proxies in my mind. There's I printed a proxy of a custom Soul Ring.
Yeah.
Because I thought it was cool with the custom art. I proxied a $900 version of Soul Ring.
Yeah.
Its effect on our gameplay, 0.
It just looks cool.
Because I already had a Soul Ring in the deck. I already purchased a real one. This one just looks cooler. Then there's the proxy, like I talked about, the Ozolith, this is a $30 card. Now, I play some cards that are $20 or $30 in my decks, but I don't always. And so that was a little bit of that's the second type where you're cheating money because you're going to play a card more powerful than the curve. And that is what our play group ultimately got scared of, was we were like, it's hard to just come out and say, this is the line in the sand. Any card over this value is unacceptable. And so we were taking it, topic by topic, and some people got frustrated with that and were like, let's just do no proxies anymore. And I still play my proxied Ozolith.
Yeah, I know.
So wherever we landed with that, I still have that card in my deck.
So proxies for me, and I'm not saying that I'm an anti-proxy guy. I don't want to be again, because I know I've and Magic 30 changed a lot of my views on it, because Magic 30, we were having this conversation way before that. I had never experienced the amount of frustration that it can be when something's so out of people's price range. So I think I was a little bit more anti-proxy at that before that. And then when Magic 30 happened, I was like, okay, I kind of understand where people are coming from a little bit, because there's a lot of conversation on Twitter about it. I engaged with a lot of that conversation, and I'll admit, some of my views at that time were more I just think that you're stupid for playing proxies at all. Why not just play the actual game? Just play the game. Because my thought, and I'm just gonna share my 2 views sent from then to now. Okay, at the time, my view was simple. Why would you? It's kind of if I want to go play, we've used Overwatch as an example, right? If I'm gonna go play Overwatch, right? There's no way for me to make a fake Overwatch to go play it, right? I could, I guess, right? But it's Magic's in this weird place where you can physically fake it, right? You can make a copy of it. I can't do that with a video game. I could do that with Monopoly. I could go make a whole Monopoly board out of cardboard and paper and draw my own things, and I can functionally play that game exactly the same with the same rules, all fake, and probably for cheaper than what I would spend on a $60 Hasbro Monopoly board.
Monopoly's catching the strays right now.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to bring Monopoly down, but you know what? Why not, right? And why not just do that with everything? And so that was my view at the time, was this is stupid. We shouldn't do this, because I don't know. I just felt you should play the game, right? And and now I would say still kind of been well, I wouldn't proxy a Monopoly board. And so I probably won't proxy cards, because in my view, if I can't afford it, or I'm ugh, that's my way of kind of all right, I'm not at that power level. I shouldn't be building at that power level. My friends probably can't do that. So why introduce that? Because similar to how the game itself is having power creep. And if you don't know what power creep is, it just means that the game is over the years gotten more powerful
and faster
right? So that's why we call it power creep in the community. But similar to how power creep is an issue in Magic in general, I was very worried about power creep in our group in general. That's right? Fair. Like I wanted that pre-con kid that comes in and plays us to still be able to play, because if we're all proxied up, we have to now be like, well, we have to offer proxies to that person and help them proxy, but then do you ruin the experience for them by saying, here bro, instead of spending $10 on Lightning Greaves, here's a proxy we have for you. Yeah. I don't know how I feel about that. I think I'd probably lean on, I just don't think that's what Magic's supposed to be. I think you should be able to, like, when you buy the card, there is an experience of like, this is mine. I bought this. Look how cool it is. And maybe like you have that moment, like at least for us when we first started, you're like, this card's out. And it's like, whoa, you're like, he bought that card. I don't know. For something, for me, that's important.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm a little bit anti-proxy.
And okay, I do genuinely agree with you on a lot of what you said right there.
Yep.
Now, the part where I start to stray a little bit is because I'm also a little bit of like, you know, Wizards of the Coast, big company.
Yeah.
They don't need our money. So if I can just say, screw them, and I'll print the same thing, and because they sell us cardboard.
Yeah.
And they wrap it up in plastic, and they feed it to us every year. And I can't even lie to you. There's a chance I'm going to be at Target later tonight buying packs. Like, I love it. But that's, like, the reality is we need to not overblow. And people work very hard on the sets at the company. They create these cards there, and they hire artists, and it's great. It's more than that. But at the end of the day, it also is that at its core, like, and that's what we purchase. Can you be charging people $80 for double masters, right? When the reality is that did not cost Wizards of the Coast more. It didn't. It just didn't. And that's why it is a bit of a weird conversation, because we are in a weird game where every one of these cardboard things can be thrown into a landfill, and it doesn't mean anything to Wizards, because they're like, we are printing this much, we know how much people are going to buy it for. They don't even set the prices, but they make all of the bank. And it's like, I have understood the frustration, because Magic 30, that anniversary, and even we can even talk about the Secret Lair a little bit that I got 2 of on accident, where that was a limited time special thing. And a lot of people did not get them because they sold out. So if you want to be mad at someone, be mad at Brandon, who got an extra one for free.
I did get an extra one, but Wizards sent it to me. I didn't ask for it. I bought one. And also, their website crashed. 90, right? Yes. So like half people who did wait, like I did.
Because you botted the website.
I bought it on the website.
Botted. BOTTED. You created a bunch of bots, and you signed on all at the same time.
Oh, yeah. I bought it. It was awesome, dude.
But yes, I know that you did purchase it.
Yeah, I waited.
There was a big conversation about this as well, and that is great.
Yeah,
let's talk about something specific to actionable to players and play groups. Can I?
Yeah.
Are we?
I think that I just want to make it clear, Ben.
Okay.
Where I've grown.
Okay, so this is about
This is more about therapy.
This is your therapy.
I've been holding on to this for a long time. I actually really appreciate you've allowed me to get this out, because I've really needed this.
Because I feel like maybe we've gone to Magic 30 and then we've steered away from it.
No. I want to talk about the actual proxy. We can move away from the controversy. We're good.
Right? We understand that and maybe that's my fault for talking about the.
No, you brought it up and it triggered it like PTSD.
I didn't bring that up, and we got there still. But either way, what I want to talk about is proxy's impact on the play group.
Yeah,
and I think it's funny enough. It boils down to, and before we start the conversation, I didn't know that we were going to have the same parallel, but it does pair up to the Mulligan rule, which is in moderation. There's nothing wrong with me printing just an Ozolith for myself, because I don't want to spend $25 on the card, or if I want a custom art on it. The problem would be if I buy, at the time, Phyrexian Altar is a sacrifice outlet that gives you a colored mana. It's a very good card, and it's $100.
Yeah.
It's not that I couldn't afford it, but to me, that's the price of my whole deck. So I'm likely not going to buy it. So that would be me. Like, so that's the conversation, right? It's like, is it okay to buy the Ozolith because I could afford it, or print the Ozolith because I could afford it?
Well, my question to you is, where is the line? Because
and that's the exact
for
issue.
Me, I'm seeing this time and time for the pro. It feels like it's almost like two political parties, like the pro proxy people and the anti proxy people, because there are two strong parties. And I'd say, like, for people who are very pro proxy, it's like they're like, yeah, I'm gonna go make a CDH deck completely proxy. I'm gonna go buy from all these custom artists everywhere. And I'm like, okay, that's cool, but like it feels like a little bit of an attitude. It doesn't feel like, oh, screw Wizards of the Coast, I'm protesting. It feels, no, you're not really on a protesting. You're just like, I wanted a CDH deck that's super dope.
Right. My deck is worth $20,000, but I paid $200 because I printed it. Yeah. And so
I guess my question is to you, and I want to put it more on you, because I don't know if I have the answer for this, so I'm going to make you answer it.
Love it.
Is, do you feel like it's a moral thing, like you kind of have to like hope that your people are honest and good players, or is there a line you can actually set?
So I think that is the conversation, right? Because it's not fair to say if we have friends that are going to spend $80 on their deck, and then friends that are going to spend $500 on the deck, which is funny because this contrasts maybe a little bit of the disclaimer I said, where we're all somewhat in the same range financially, which we are. Yeah. There's a difference, because friend who's spending $500 on their deck might put a $50 card in the deck. Yeah. Whereas friend that's spending $80 on the deck would never pay more than $5 for a single card. So it's hard for me to say anything short of $50 is cool for us to print and put in there, because for some people that has a much larger impact. But then again, we can loop around ourselves here and say, well, should friend who only wants to spend $80 on a deck be restricted financially when we're all trying to just play the same game, when maybe they just physically don't have the resources, because we're a diverse group. Some of us are taking classes, some of us are in college, some of us are working part-time, some of us are working full-time. Yeah. Some of us have different expenses than other people. Like, there's just different stages of life and different access to financial resources. Yeah. And so how much do you want to let that bleed in to the group? Because there's that whole conversation financially. Then there's people who I think get bothered by the aesthetics of it. And I have a friend, our friend Todd. Yeah. Now he's okay with the proxy, but he loves like art on cards.
Yeah, and I would actually agree with him a little bit. I also agree with aesthetics are important to me.
And so he goes both ways. And so that's another whole thing. Yeah. People that like the aesthetics, some people say, well, aesthetically, I want my own art. I want to choose something that, like, he has a Skull Clamp. It's a $10 card. Yes. Very affordable for him. He has a card that I printed for him from a TV show or an anime that he really likes. Yeah, not something I'm familiar with, but he sent me the picture and he wanted it on Skull Clamp. Yep. And so there are some people that would see that and be like, not a fan, because that's not Wizards of the Coast. That's not the Magic universe on a card. But it breaks the aesthetics, right? Whereas, so again, you have both sides of people that care about aesthetics could be on either side of this discussion here, in addition to people that have differing views of the financial aspect.
Yeah. And I think if the battle is aesthetic, proxy should like, if your group is arguing over aesthetics, because then maybe it's an easier argument.
If you have a friend that's saying, I don't like that you're doing this because the art takes me out of it, you know, I want to
I really don't like that you have all Adventure Time
characters. I don't like it looks dumb. Listen,
get over yourself. Like, honestly, like that's
funny because you say that, but like that's what I'm thinking. It is like, come on, you know? Like, I get it, we're playing a fantasy card game. Like, you have to be okay that like other people are gonna enjoy it differently.
Yeah, believe it or not, people in the fantasy play group are gonna have like a vast variety of things they like and are inspired by.
And here's the thing, power to you, all the power to you, if you genuinely are like, I love the lore behind Magic and I like that my decks make sense and our flavor wins because they make sense according to the lore. If that's what you like in the game, like we've talked about this, that like people can find value in playing the game for so many different reasons. I've never read a thing of lore in my life, but occasionally I'll listen to a YouTube video on it when it interests me, and like, that's great. It gives me appreciation for these characters that we see on the cards. And so that can be really fun, but like, you have to draw that line, right? Yeah. Of how much you're willing to let outside world bleed into the game. And this is also a discussion that we've heard with the universes, whatever it's called.
Universes Beyond, yeah.
Yes, where they're now taking Transformers and Lord of the Rings coming up is one that people are very excited for. There was the Warhammer crossover. Yeah. We were taking these other universes and you're mushing in, and people are mad about that.
Yeah, they are genuinely very
mad. And like, because people are like, imagine if you played a Captain America card, if someday there's a Marvel crossover, and
there was a whole thing of like, oh, I don't want to play against your Walking Dead deck versus my like traditional, whatever.
Because if your Jace is reskinned as whatever, then people are mad about that. And so that's, and maybe we're just rambling and this episode's not going to sound that great, but like there are just genuinely so many different angles you can take here.
Yeah.
You can be mad that the cards don't fit in. You can be happy because the cards are unique to you.
Yeah.
If you care about, like, I love Marvel movies. I love the Avengers.
Yeah.
So like, yeah, it would be cool maybe to play Thanos' Infinity Gauntlet somehow on a card. But there are people that would genuinely get very mad about that. Mm-hmm. There are people that have access to the financial resources that feel like maybe that's where their advantage comes from in the game, right? Yeah. And so they don't want the person who doesn't have those same advantages to have a proxied version. And then there's the exact opposite.
Yeah. So, I agree. Like, it's a complex topic. And it's why we brought it up is because if you're new to Commander or anything in Magic, because this affects all of Magic, like standard, whatever, modern.
Proxies are in any format.
Proxies are a big one. And they are becoming more than ever a common conversation, and I think in play groups and in the online community of like, okay, what do we do about this? Because this is something that we can do. We are doing. There are entire artists and communities that are dedicated to just proxies.
Yeah.
Like whole companies about it. And so obviously my answer is no, I don't want to ban all of proxies and make sure, I don't want Wizards to come clamp down on this and like just shut this down. If you do this, you're like doing something illegal. They could do that theoretically,
right?
But it would be a douchey move, right?
Right.
And then we wouldn't want that because that
could be like if we find you printing anything close to Magic card, and they do have copyright claims out there. They do,
yeah.
So they touch on that, yeah. And so I guess if you've been listening with us debate this for 30 minutes now and you want the answer, I don't know.
Yeah, I genuinely think it, and I have tried to tackle this one in my own mind, in my own like way, and I'm like, I have my place that I'm comfortable standing on, but I think if you're trying to find a place of peace, like I think this does tear groups apart a bit. Like I have seen people, and maybe you're taking the game a little too seriously, but like if this is genuinely
fair, it's definitely fair.
If you're genuinely getting frustrated with your friends and there's arguments happening, I think the thing to lead to resolve is you have to come to some kind of conclusion, because if someone's like, I want proxies, and then one person's like, nope, screw you, I don't like proxies, there has to be some kind of compromise. Right. I think the happy compromise is being like, okay, we're going to just look at the power level of this, and we're going to look at what is our power level as a group and determine that first. Yeah. Before we talk about proxies, what is our power level as a group? And then try to find some kind of common ground on like what's okay and what's not. Because I think like, you could get Gaia's Crail, you could proxy her, and I'd be like, okay, well now your green deck is insane.
And you could put a picture of the Earth on it. It could have fun art and be absurdly powerful.
So,
and I could pay $1.50 to go home and print it.
Take it. I think you were right in taking it by its individual case, and I think that's the best way to approach it.
And that's something I did want to circle back to, which is where did our group land with this?
Yeah.
And so we've come away from it partially because I lost interest in printing them, and so we didn't interact.
Because it's still expensive.
Yeah, because and it's like my printer was so annoying because you'd print it, cut off half the cards. So I got to the point where like I spent $8 on 20 sheets of cardstock, which is like maybe doesn't sound like a lot, but is crazy when you're talking about sheets of cardstock. And so when I would get only 3 cards for a full sheet, you're like, this is so annoying. But anyways, where we landed with it, and if I had access to print proxies, I think we are trying out one. It had to be realistic for your budget. Mm-hmm. Which is like, if you build an $80 deck, you want a $20 card, that's okay. But you can't ask for an $80 card because that makes no sense.
Yeah.
And we wanted to put limits on 1 per deck. Yeah. You're not going to go and I'm not going to print 40 cards for your deck. And you're going to play this absurd because it's realistic for you to have a $20 card. Here's 30 $20 cards. That breaks it a little bit.
Yeah.
So 1 to 2 proxies per deck. And I think that is where we landed. And I feel totally comfortable with that, where if it ever came up again in our play group where people were interested in proxies, these are rules that I would be okay to say that's our general rule.
Yeah, and I would say that, and this is just a side comment, if you will, I'd rather bring the power level from the top people down than bring the power level up for the smaller players. Like, I'd rather someone say, Brandon, take the Chrome Mox out of your deck, I have Chrome Mox, I didn't proxy it, just have it. And maybe in order to make it so that our new player can play. Not that I think Chromax is that broken, but
right.
Say it was, right? Say I genuinely did a good job with it. You take it out, right? Like I would rather take it out than have to force them to introduce proxies. Because just a side point.
Because does it feel a little bad if you pull up to the table, we pull up to the table, and you're like, I'm gonna play my Chrome Mox. I paid $90. I bought the card.
Yeah.
And then I say, boom, here's my Chrome Mox, and there's a picture of Squidward on it, and I printed it yesterday, and like, it feels bad a little bit.
It does. Like, it would hurt a little bit because
like,
I would be sad because I'm really proud of that card because it's like probably it is my most expensive card, and I'll be like, why?
Yeah. And then I'm just like, Squidward taps for a blue. Yeah. And so it's just like, there is that conversation. Yeah. Exactly too. And so maybe. So I guess to that point, then what feels worse? Us to say, Brandon, you play at a Chrome Mox is too expensive for our play group digit, or Brandon, if someone wants a proxied Chrome Mox, we're gonna give it to him, and it's gonna have your face on it.
I would rather just take the Chrome Mox out. I'm never attached unless it was very targeted. Like people are just
mad at you
being
today.
Mean to me, like unless it was if it was a genuine like, hey, we're having a hard time.
Do that sometimes. Jamie
Keegan.
Are we calling him Keegan or Jamie?
I call him Keegan just to keep it grounded, but you can call him whatever you want. Right. Yeah.
Keegan Hatfield. Follow him on Instagram. Yeah. Do you have Instagram still? No. He's off Instagram. Yeah. Facebook.
So I feel like
he's got nothing.
I feel like this is kind of where I expected the proxy conversation to go, and I'm thankful that you brought it up because one, got off my chest, and if that's if anything this podcast was, maybe it's just Brandon got a little bit off your chest, and maybe you did too. Maybe you feel like, okay, these guys kind of get where I'm coming from. I was a little angry about this thing, and I would say for those who are still angry about proxies and the conversation that's around it, I think there's a middle ground to be found. We're just working on it,
because I think I could genuinely sit here and run myself in circles about this topic because I feel both sides so much. Yes. Because it sucks. If I paid up for my $30 card, I don't want to see you print a cheap version. But then I'm also like, I also don't want to make you go buy that, right? Yeah. And I don't want to say that I can't play it because you can't print it. Yeah. And so, but then I also want the proxy. I have my Ozolith. So I could sit here and see both sides and go back and forth. And I think that a lot of people, if they take the time to think about it, can do the same thing.
It's the curse of reasonableness.
I was going to say, that's exactly the term I wanted to go with. Be reasonable with your play group. Figure out, why are you sitting down and playing the game tonight? Are you sitting down and playing the game because you want to win and because you want to kick the crap out of everyone else? Then like, that's a separate discussion than if you're saying this is something that we do as a group, is we sit down, we play a couple games a week. Yeah. Like, you need to understand what you want to get out of the night. Yeah. And so do what is fun for you and for the people that you play with.
Yeah. Especially the second term of like thinking about others in the game, because it may be fun for you to win every week. Right. Might not be the same for the rest of the group who are playing precons,
Probably isn't.
Yeah. So I would say, I couldn't word it better, Ben. I think you nailed it. I think that this conversation has been great. I'm proud that me and you came to, because I think if anyone had like stark contrast, it was probably me and you. We tend to, maybe because I'm a little bit of a contrarian and I like to disagree on stuff, but typically I like to come around and be like, well, I may disagree with you on this, but I ultimately really just want to have a conversation about it,
and that's the most important thing you can do. And that's, again, what we want to circle back to is like, you and I came into this thinking that you and I were on opposite ends. Yeah. And now that we've had the discussion, which is the heart behind the rule 0, that term that you'll hear in Magic. Yeah. This is the reality behind it, is like, you may come to the table and say, man, I hate the idea of you proxying something. Yeah. But then when you talk about the fact that like, this person's deck is worth $50, they just can't afford to keep up with you, then like, you can come to these middle grounds. Yeah. And so,
which
be good people.
Yeah. It's almost like that Magic kind of is teaching us life lessons.
Right? It almost is like that. And it's almost like Commander specifically is a multiplayer format for a reason.
And you have to learn how to be kind to people.
And you have to learn to both work together, to achieve common goals.
Yeah. Even though I absolutely called Noah out a lot, and I apologize, and now I'm thinking maybe I should really say sorry.
Yeah, maybe you should reach out to him.
Yeah, I should probably call him after this.
We haven't been able to get in touch with him since we started talking about
That's
him.
true. He hasn't come and played Magic anymore. All right. Thanks so much for watching this episode, guys. We've really enjoyed this one, and we will be pumping out some more soon. Me and Ben came to an agreement. You saw it live. You know, in a time of such disunity, me and Ben were repairing America one step at a time.
And in the end, it was a good deal.
It was such a good deal. All right, Keegan, get out. See you guys later.